Hello, welcome on this Saturday morning for our course on Blender 101 with Dark Art Studio. We are arconomy.com. It is a website that allows, it's a safe place for artists to do commissions, as it's also safe for our buyers. My name is Seeksy. I am kind of the host and the community liaison of this event. This is going to be part of a new little segment we're going to have. So I'd like to welcome everyone here for our first one. Our first teacher or instructor of this segment is Dark Art Studio. He is the creator of Tales of the Gods comic book. If you ever get a chance, take a look. It is really, really good. But yeah, I'm going to pass it over to Dark Arts Studio. Dark Arts, please introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit more about yourself and what you are planning to do today and get on with it.
Sup, I am a comic book artist. Been doing this for several years. Sort of lost count at this point. I think it's pushing 10. Um, and I've dabbled a little bit in comic book making, Blender, and just general 2D slash 3D art programs. And I've slowly acquired Blender skills over the years, self-taught by using the Blender manuals, going through other YouTube tutorials, things like that. And some parts of it have been a headache, but probably worth it in the long run. Um, well, some things worth it. Other things, sorry, Vietnam flashbacks. Anyway, but yeah, I'm gonna tell you how to get started on Blender. Maybe get a little bit of maybe like ease the cognitive problem a little bit because Blender is very intimidating when you open it up and its controls look like an F-16 fighter jet uh, when you step into the cockpit. So we're going to try to alleviate some of that and make Blender a little bit less intimidating. So if you haven't done it already, go to blender.org and download Blender. I'm going to be working in 4.0. The latest version, I believe, is 4.3. The reason that I'm using 4.0 is because the person who has made the screencast keys, which will allow you to be able to view what keys that I am pressing at all times, so you can keep up with that, is unfortunately not hasn't been updated for version 4.3 yet, and that is an external add-on for your convenience. It is not part of the typical Blender package, and I had to go on GitHub to find that add-on. Um, so 4.0, there may be 4.0 to 4.3, there may be some slight differences in what I'm showing you versus what 4.3 can provide because they made quite a bit of improvements and rearranged a few things, but everything everything as far as that concerned is there's going to be the same tools available. It's just Blender Foundation may have actually put those same tools in different areas, um, which I have been discovering to much frustration and headache when playing around with 4.3. But go to blender.org. If you go to the home screen and go to download, it should give you the versions there. 4.3 is going to be at the forefront in a big blue button. But if you want to download 4.0, there are previous versions underneath the Mac OS, Linux, and Windows versions. And it'll say in tiny letters, looking for, you just click on the link for previous versions, and it will give you a button for download any Blender, and it'll show you an index of releases all the way from Blender 1.0 all the way to 4.3. Every version that they release so they make it to where, say, if you saved a file in a different version, it will. It's so when you try to load that old file in a new version of Blender and it says, "Hey, I can't do that," and breaks it, um, you can always just revert to a previous version of Blender that you were working in and still use that file. So right off the Blender website in docs.blender.org/manual, which I've got the link provided below in the chat. Uh, we're going to start with the user interface and splash screen, which is what you are seeing right here. This is the splash screen. Now, what it's going to show is new files, like right over here, and any type of file that you want to start with. This is basically a preloaded interface for how you want to start using Blender. The general file is going to give you this basic layout that you see behind the splash screen here. Or you can start with sculpting, VFX, video editing, and there's a bunch of different types. The only thing this is it's just giving you a preset for what this is. So you can change any of this up at any time and even make your own layouts here. But to get rid of the splash screen, all we got to do is left click off of it. And I'm going to turn my screencast keys on so you guys can see this. Okay. Now, if you cannot see those screencast keys over here in the bottom left, please let me know. So what we're going to do is focus on just showing you everything, like what these screens are, what these mean, like what these menus are, so you can navigate Blender a little bit better. But I know the first thing that I always wanted to do when I open Blender is how the hell do I move the camera around the scene? That's the first thing everybody wants to do. So to get that out of the way, if you've got a mouse and keyboard set up, I'm not really sure what it's going to be for something like a tablet, but for a PC, it's going to be the middle mouse wheel. And if you click the middle mouse wheel down while you're inside this viewport screen here, that will allow you to navigate around the viewport. And if you want to zoom in or out, just roll the mouse wheel like this. So let me pull up the Blender documentation, and we are going to start with the Blender menus. So this right here, up in the top left-hand corner, is going to be your top bar. This is going to be where, if you want to, say, open new files, your basic stuff like that, you want to import previous models, or you can even hit append to get previous portions of other files that you wanted to get into a new project. And your edit menu is going to have all your preferences. We're not going to focus on render and stuff here, but here's your basic top menu. Now, I am going to skip to workspaces on this. So your basic workspaces are just to the right of your top menu. And there's these little tabs here. The first thing that Blender always sticks you in if you open it up with a general file is going to be layout. So layout has all of your basic components, a bare bones basic components of windows that you're going to need. And if you tab over, you're going to notice that there are different presets to each one of these. like sculpting, modeling, UV editing, texture paint, shading, animation, rendering, composition. And if you want to add more, there are more options, and you can hit the plus button out here, and it will show you a drop down menu of a bunch of different types of layouts. Just think of these tabs as presets for what you are trying to achieve in Blender. So right now, we're going to stick to the layout menu. So Blender is very, very heavy on keyboard shortcuts. Now, most people, I've noticed, like to use the point and click method. So I'm going to show you a way I do things, but I need to set you up on why I do things a certain way. Lots of Blender users have a bad habit when they first start of using point and click editing, because in a world of digital cognitive easing, we are trying to lower the barriers of entry at warp speed without considering the cost of working efficiently on the back end. So what I'm about to show you is slightly more difficult to learn, but it will set you up for working much more efficiently and a lot faster than your peers in the future. So I can't emphasize enough, know your hotkeys, because they're going to be very important. So just try to remember this going forward, apply it to most programs going forward. If it's easy to use up front, there is a good chance you will be making things harder on yourself later. And some of the other lessons we're going to be learning here is the use of what I'm trying to show you may not make itself apparent until you get down the road. So, getting started, we're going to go to the layout of the 3D viewport, and this right here, this window, where the cube is going to be your viewport window. And that's where you're going to be able to see the 3D objects and what, sort of, modifiers, manipulations that you've done to it in real time. So that's your viewport. Now we're going to go to the outliner, and that is in your top right here. This is going to be the outline of your scene. So if you're a college student or have just, generally taken any English courses, the reason they call it an outliner is because everything's divided like it's in bullet points here. And these are your scene objects that you can click on in the outliner. So we've got Blender always starts you off in a general with a camera, a cube, and a light source. And I can click individually on each one of these objects to select it. Or I can select the entire collection right there, which is everything that's going to be tabbed below this. So it's organized just like, an essay outline, hence the name outliner. And the next window that's going to be very important is going to be the properties, and that is going to be in the bottom right hand corner. Your properties menu is going to contain little tabs over here all on its own of things like your render settings, what you want the output to be, like where you want the file to go when you save it or when you export it as, say, an animation or as a single frame that you want to render out. Your view layer is going to have some of your object and scene settings inside of it. We're not going to spend too much time or too many details on that. But moving on to the next one, it's going to show your scene setup where you can simulate certain things, like your keying presets, like how you want the world to actually interact with the objects, audio adjustments. Then you've got your world tab, which right now my background right here is that's your world. This whole globe right here is your world settings. So I can do things like, you know, change the color of this, for example, in your world settings. All right, and this is going to be your collections tab. It's basically the same thing as your scene collections up here, but you can add custom properties to it, which we won't go over in this section of the course. And then you've got your object menu. This is going to give you the details of your object. And it's going to show you like what its locations, rotations, and different types of scales that you can apply to this. Like for example, I'll just show you the transform, and that's going to allow you to make manual, precise numeric entry adjustments on the X, Y, Z axis. You can rotate it, scale it, all sorts of stuff. And then it's going to show the relations, which are, how it relates to other objects. Collections, again, instancings and motion paths, but that stuff's a little bit too complicated, so we're not going to focus on that. And then you've got your modifiers menu, and all you got to do is click on here to add modifiers, but we're not going to go over that because that's a little bit more advanced stuff. I'm just showing you what each of these tabs generally is going to do. And you've got your particle properties. We're not going to go over that because that is advanced. And you've got your physics tab. That's another advanced one. Object constraints. Your cube properties, or your object properties menu, and then shaders. And that's going to affect things like what the color of this thing looks like, what its texture is. But we won't be going over that in this. And your brushes. So now that we've got that out of the way, I'm going to show you some basics on how to actually manipulate this cube with Blender hotkeys. And I think that's the first thing that you need to get set up on. So what we need to do here is we need to, first off, if you don't have the cube selected, just bring your left mouse in here, or your mouse in here and left click, and that will select the object. You know it's going to be highlighted because of the orange around the edge of it. That means that this object has been selected. And make sure that your select box option here in the left-hand menu of the viewport is turned on. It'll have like little dots and dashes around a mouse cursor. And if you want to hold click, it'll show you different methods of selection that you can do. Like say, cube select, circle select. And if you want to use the classic lasso method, which is so prominent in 2D programs, you can use that too. But I'm just going to stick to the point and click method for the select box. So once you have your cube selected, I want you to press the G key. A lot of critical things are going to revolve around being able to use the G key to, big air quotes here, grab objects. That's why it is parented to the G key, is because G for grab, it makes things simple. So what you can do is just hit the G key, and now that is locked. That object is locked to your mouse's movement. So now that we've got this locked to this point, you're just like, well, how do I drop it wherever I want? After I've figured out what position I want it to be in. You've got two options. So you can left click to place it there. And I'm going to undo that. Or you can move it to a different location and press the Enter key. And that will lock in whatever transforms that you've done on this grid. So we're going to undo that, and I'm going to show you a more efficient method of moving this around, because here's the deal with 3D software and computers. Everything is related. Everything is translated and related to how you are viewing this through the viewport. The computer makes everything relative to whatever angle you're at and how it's going to move. So here's the issue. I can move this object wherever I want in the viewport based off of this angle, but it's like, oh, from this angle, it looks like it snapped, it snapped to the grid. But if you rotate the camera around here, it has floated somewhere else in 3D space, because it only understands like what angle you're viewing it, like relative to that. So that's all it can know. So if you want to move things precisely on the grid, hit the G key again after you've selected the cube, and then say we want to move it along this red or the X axis. You hit the G key, and then immediately after you hit the X key. And that will lock this cube to your grid on the X-axis, and it will only move along that. And if you press the G key while the cube is selected again, we're going to lock it to the Z-axis. Does the same thing. And you guessed it, grab, and then Y-axis. You can lock this to any X, Y, or Z axis to move on a precise plane. So applying this same concept going forward, there are a few other types of manipulation that you can do. So we're going to hit the G key, and we're going to rotate the cube by pressing R. And it will follow your mouse movements in order to do the rotate. But we want to rotate this on a specific axis, not just something relative to the viewport. So what I just went over, you grab, rotate, and then press one of the corresponding axis keys, like our Z key here, and it will lock the rotation to that axis just like it did for any other transform movement. So anything that has a transform on it, which is any sort of manipulation of an object, can be locked to an axis by pressing those keys. So the next thing we're going to focus on, we can rotate it on any axis. Next thing we're going to focus on, though, is we're going to grab this object again, and then we're going to hit S to scale. And that will allow you to shrink or expand this object to any size that you want. And you can apply the same scaling thing. Say if you hit grab or the G key, S for scale, and then lock it to the X-axis, it will expand or contract along any axis. So much like video game quick menus, Blender is kind of set up like that, to where you can take a small thing and build options and build options and build options and build options upon these very simple foundational concepts and apply it going forward. So we've got...
I've got a quick question about scaling.
What's up?
I've got a quick question about scaling.
Go for it.
I noticed that when I scale and I look in the object panel, that if I make it one direction, all the scales are in the positive space. If I do it the other direction, they're in the negative space, but each way the cube is larger. are there any consequences to scaling objects into the negative space to make them larger?
Scaling them into the negative space to make them larger.
Yeah, if you go to the object panel, you'll see what I'm talking about. It's like scale X, Y, and Z. And if I scale them one way, you see scale X, in that case, goes to a positive number, but try it the other way.
Oh, you mean...
Keep going until you go to it where it's indefinitely small. There you go. See, now it's a negative number.
So, there's no like real consequences for that. It's just saying like relative to what you've like done is basically what you've taken is you've turned the cube inside out and caused it to go in different directions. Now, that may have an effect on something like normals, which I haven't tested yet, but that's a little bit that's going a little bit advanced.
Should I assume that it's probably for the best if I focus on when making it bigger, making sure it's positive, so I don't have any weird consequences I can't figure out later?
Yes, I would try to do that. Like, don't turn your cube inside out. It's probably like I'm not 100% sure about that, but in theory, it could mess up. It could mess up normals, but I'll have to dig into that because I've actually never I've never dealt with something like that before. Because usually what I'm scaling, I've never done that to an object. But that is a good point. Some user might actually accidentally do this to an object and suffer the consequences of that. So I will have to look into that.
It does say somebody did confirm in the chat that scaling negatively can flip the normals.
It will. Okay, so it will flip the norm. Okay. So yeah, don't do that when it comes to things like when you start to do things like UV editing, stuff like that. Has probably have some bad consequences. Like everything will be reversed. Your textures won't line up right, etc., etc. But moving on, I'm going to show you a few different sections of the viewport presets, which are going to be these little balls in the top right-hand corner here. And these are your viewport shading modes. So that first little ball right here is going to show you a grid where all of these little vertexes and stuff connect. And the next option here is going to be your this is going to be solid view, and that's just going to give you a basic gray, partially shaded, like relatively shaded object, just so you can still tell that it's a three-dimensional object. And that's going to actually most of this is going to be reserved for like editing the object, and you don't want things like textures and shaders and stuff making a whole bunch of noise for you and getting in the way. The next option here is going to be the viewport shader, and this is going to allow you to make materials previews. Like, say for example, if I wanted to change this cube by using the materials menu here and selecting base color and just picking any color in the color wheel and changing this cube to red, it's going to show me a preview of what that shader may look like when it is semi-rendered out. It's going to cut corners so it doesn't swing off of your hard drive, or not hard drive, swing off of your CPU and GPUs like a rabbit orangutan. And it's going to keep your graphics cards fans from flipping on when it starts to chug. Now, if you want to make it do that, and push it a little bit further, the 3D view in the this is going to be the fully rendered view, and you can see how it gives a lot more accurate lighting. It's starting to show like textures and stuff being brought in here, and it's a little bit harder. Like each time you jump one of these things up, it's going to be a little bit more graphically intense on your hardware. So just be aware of that. And if you've got something like that's got a crap ton of vertexes or high resolution object, just be aware when you switch into this mode, it may chug a little bit. Which brings me to the next point of manipulation. So I'm going to show you how to edit an object. But before I do that, I'm going to make you aware of something. And this is super important because I suffered the consequences of this and didn't know what the hell was going on for months. I couldn't understand what was happening, and I had always had to bring a new object in, remanipulate it. Do not make this mistake that I did. There is something called origins in objects. So origins are where every point of manipulation is relatively translated to, and that means everything revolves around the origin point. So when I move this cube here, for example, you see this little orange dot in the center of it? That means that all of that object data is relative to that. And when I hit rotate, no matter what, and lock it to an axis, it will always rotate around that point, no matter where I carry it. But here's a problem when you go into your editing menu. And to go into the editing menu, you hit tab. And here's the physical drop-down menu in case you get lost. And here are the different modes. But right now I am in edit mode. I was previously in object mode. So when you go into edit mode, it's going to show you all of the vertexes on these cubes, and you can select the pieces of this individually if you wish. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit the A key, and that will select all of them. Now that I've clicked off, like, so you can click off of that object and it'll deselect them, click back on it, hit the A key, and it'll select everything, all the vertexes in that object. So here's the problem that I'm leading you into. When I select everything on this cube in edit mode, and I hit the G key to grab, and then lock it to an x-axis, look what happens. My origin stays here, and the cube goes that way. It's like, oh, what's the problem? What's the problem? That's not that big of a deal. Yeah, well, here's the problem. I'm going to show you the awful errors that I made. And I'm going to tab out of edit mode. If I hit the tab key again, it goes back into object mode. And I'm going to grab this cube with the G key. Oops. Escape. I'm going to grab this cube with the G key. Lock it to the Z axis. And I'm just going to rotate it around the Z axis. Look what happens. Now going to rotate around that origin instead of the cube itself. So think of this origin object as that cube's own little universe of relative space. It's saying, here's where I exist, or here's where all of my data exists. Therefore, manipulate everything relative to where that dot is. And when you go into edit mode and move the cube, this is what happens. The origin will stay behind. So be aware of that. Some other things to show you in edit mode for basic manipulation. Up here in your more of your next to your top menus, there are 3 different modes of selection and manipulation. in edit mode. Right now, we are in vertex mode. Vertexes are where all points or all edges are going to converge to a single point. So these are points of data that form this object. And if we select one of these with left mouse, grab it with the G key, and then lock it to an axis, we can manipulate individual points of that object's data and transform the object in very specific ways. And you can do the same thing with a different mode here, which is edge select. And it will only select the edges of objects. So if I grab the G key, lock it to the x-axis, I can move it, manipulate it however I want. And another point of manipulation or selection is the faces mode, which is the one to the right. And you can do the same thing with it. So all of these things are mostly relative. Like all of these things are going to revolve around grabbing and manipulating things. So that's why I say the things that you need to, that's why I would say the things that you need to learn are your hotkeys and how to switch between these different modes very, very quickly. Because if you're sitting around just dragging the mouse and pointing and manipulating, like say if I use the move here, like this with the mouse is not efficient. It's going to suck for you if you do it that way. So be very careful. All right, so now that we've covered a little bit about edit mode, I've got object manipulation covered. We've got
Does
basic
anyone
edit
have
mode
any?
covered.
Oh, sorry. Does anyone have any questions so far? Since we're switching to something else that you may have thought of while we're here.
Anyone? Anyone? Alrighty, moving along. So I'm gonna do a little teaser here since we're just a few minutes out. I'm gonna show you some things that you can do with edit mode here. And this will probably be for later courses. So if you select any portion of these objects in edit mode with the vertexes, you can hit the E key to extrude, hit the G key again to grab that new object that you've just created, and we'll lock it to the Z axis. There we go. And now look what we've done here. What E does, E is for extrude. E creates a duplicate of said portion of the object that you have selected, duplicates it, and now makes it part of this whole. And we can Control Z to back out of that. And I'm going to show you something cool that you can do with the face select mode activated. So we're going to select an entire face here. We're going to hit the E key to extrude, and wherever the normals on this object, which is just the points of data or arrows that tell you, hey, this face or this portion of the object says mathematically, I am pointing this direction. Blender will auto lock it to whatever axis that it is facing. So right now it's facing the Z axis. And after I've hit E to extrude, after I've selected that face, I can bring it up here. And now I've extended or extruded that object. And you can do it along any of these faces. And start making crazy stuff. Don't panic, just always hit Control Z, and you can always back out of that. And you can do that from edit mode to specifically extend the object, and add to its overall geometry if you want to. So, trying to remember some other things that we haven't covered here. Yes. So back to some basics that I've definitely forgot to cover here. For object manipulation, and this can apply to any transforms or manipulations that I've showed you so far. You can hit the grab key, and we'll lock it to the y-axis from this frame of reference that I'm using. You can lock it to whatever axis you want. But if I go to my number pad and I hit 1 and then enter to confirm the command, it will move it exactly 1 unit. So if you want to get very precise, you can grab, lock it to the y-axis. Now, for example, I'll just move it half a unit, 0.5. So if you've got a very mathematically precise amount that you want to move it by, Blender will allow you to do that. And one more thing we're going to cover here is a little bit more about sticking in this nav menu. Is if you are in object mode and you've got your mouse placed inside this viewport window, if you hit the 0 key, it will automatically go to the active camera view in Blender. In order to get out of that view, all you got to do is press your middle mouse wheel, and boom, you're back into your normal view. Now, the number keys can actually lock your view to different axes on here as well. So if I hit 1, for example, now I'm locked to the y-axis. If I hit 3, I'm locked to the x-axis. If I hit 7, it goes to an above view and locks to the Z. And if I go to 9, that flips it to the bottom. And if I hit 4 here, it will rotate it by a few degrees at a time. Now, I can't remember the exact degrees, but I think it's like 3, 4, 5. What's 90 divided by 6? Let's see here, calculator. It will rotate it by 15 degrees at a time if I do that. And if you want to go the other direction, it's the opposite end of the keyboard from 4, which is going to be 6. And you can rotate that either way. And again, that applies to any view you've got. Now, if I hit 5, for example, this will put it in the Diablo mode, which is the orthographic view, and everything looks kind of, it's like it flattens it to the screen. Like, sort of how the program's like actually translating it rather than, giving you that bubble view. If you want to get out of it, just press the 5 key again, and you're good to go. And also for that 15 degrees at a time rotation, if you want to go up and down, it's going to be 2 and 8. So there's a basic setup for Blender. Anything more specific, I'm probably going to dive into later, but that's just how you get started and basic manipulation, what some of these things are, what they do. So you're not scared of it and peeing your pants like I did when I first got started. So hopefully this has been enlightening, helpful. If we got any questions, I'm open to them. Anything?
Yeah, for me at least. I really appreciate you doing this, though.
No problem.
I know you've
No,
done
I've tried.
some.
Go ahead.
I know you've done some animation on here. Maybe you could show them that here.
Oh, absolutely. Now that's a little bit. That's a little bit more advanced, but okay. So one of the menus I didn't cover is your timeline down here. So that's always going to be the default at the bottom if you open up a general file. And if you want to expand these windows at any point, just hover your mouse in between the windows and drag and drop. That's all you got to do. So you want to animate this cube. Okay. So all of that crap that I just showed you, we're going to compound this, and we're going to stack it all on top of each other and use all of it at the same time. And then add one more thing on top of it. I'm going to select my cube, and I'm going to press the I key. And that is I for insert keyframe. And it will always be in the bottom left right here. It'll always start out by default on the first keyframe. So if I want to manipulate this cube in time, I hit I, and I'm going to choose location. And if you see here on the keyframes, we've got, oops, it disappeared on me. There we go. We've got a keyframe that has been set by this little marker down here. So what we want to do is we want to move this cube along the y-axis in time. And we'll go out here and we'll say we want it to move within 60 frames, okay? We'll just take your little marker here and drag down the timeline to 60. And then we're going to hit grab again on our cube, lock it to the y-axis, move it here, left click or press enter, your choice. And then while this is still here, we're going to hit I again to insert keyframe and then select location. Now we've got 2 keyframes from 1 to 60. Now I'm going to start our timeline over again by going, jumping to the first point, and then I'm going to hit the play key, left to right, or right to left, depending on your perspective. And that is how you manipulate a cube or any other object really in time. Now, there's a lot to cover in each one of these menus. So I could spend an entire day just on one of these tabs alone. That's how much information is in here. There's a lot. So that's why I just wanted to cover general things to get you into it, get you poking around and looking at things, because you want, like, the whole problem with Blender is it's not fun at first. If you make it fun first and allow people to do some basic manipulation stuff, they're way more likely to stick with it and continue to do it. It wasn't that way in my experience, but I am really freaking stubborn. I know people do not share that level of stubborn willpower that I've got. So hopefully this helps people that just want to jump into it and start having fun immediately. But that's how you do it.
Great. Gamma wants to know. Gamma has stated, I just want to know from a basic perspective as an artist, what products can you make with Blender? So, am I making an animation? Art? What's the bounds or possibility of a product?
Oh boy. Okay. I'm not ballsy enough to say that like what you can do with Blender is infinite. But I have dove into different possibilities of what Blender is capable of, and I think the moment that I think I've hit bedrock, it comes out of nowhere swinging and shows me it's like, no, your imagination is just very limited in what you can do with this.
Do you? Th-
You can almost do anything infinitely with this one program, and that's why I'm such a freaking fanboy of it, is because I can't believe this is open source software. It's just how you manipulate it is brain breaking. It has it available. You can manipulate it in any way you want, any form or fashion. It's like Willy Wonka's elevator. It'll go up ways, down ways, left ways, right ways, long ways, diagonal ways. It will do it. It's just, where's the menu or where's the tool that does that thing that I'm thinking of? And that's the hard part, is finding that.
I know you've done some animation. I know you did your entry in for the Arconomy drinks through
Yeah.
Blender. Could you pull that up and show people?
Let's see if I can find it.
Just to give an example of something that you've actually made through the program, and that's something that maybe that's achievable through it. To give them an idea.
Okay.
Worst comes to worst, we can throw a link to it in your economy. I know it's on there, but if you can pull it up through the program so they can take a look.
All right. Okay. May have pulled up the wrong file. Don't say. Okay. So here's the deal with this, is I actually created 2 separate animation files and then had to edit this in post. But that's no big deal. We can show both of them. So I'm going to go to my layout here. I'm going to go to my camera view. And the thing is like, I appended these into different projects. So it's not going to be. Nope. File, open.
For those who want to see the full animation together, I will put a link here in the chat of the submission that was made, and this was made in Blender. Well, the 2 items were, and then what program
There
did you use?
There it is. Okay, I got it. Holy crap, this took so long to load. I forgot how much I did on this. Okay, so Blender is going to chug on me here. But here's basically what it looks like from the outside. And it might ruin some of the magic to it that I put into it to, like, manipulate it. But you've just got some basic elements, and then everything like past that point is just like standard, like cinema camera tricks that you can use. You can build the whole environment if you want, but 9 times out of 10, I don't see a point in that, because it's very costly. So here's sort of what you can achieve with it.
How long have you been working with Blender? Do you remember when you started?
I started poking it or poking at it right when I started comics, but I didn't pay much attention to it. So it's been like a slow bleed and a slow shift over to Blender. And I've started messing with it more and more and more and more once I realized how, like, what the possibilities are with it. So on and off for the comic book portion of the career is probably, I did it on and off for about 4 or 5 years. And then after that point, there was a breakover point, and I just started like really like tapping into Blender and seeing what it could do. So technically 10 plus years, but I'm not really counting the first 5 because I may have gone, like 3 months at a time before even opening the program back then. But now it's gotten to a point where I almost open Blender daily, and just to see what I can do with it.
Okay, Gamma has a question. Other than yourself, resources for learning more or YouTube videos, etc. Recommends, or could you post a list later? Do you have any like people that you would recommend watching on YouTube, or what are some of your resources that helped you to learn?
One of the guys that really got me into it, let me search for him here. It was called Blender. I believe it's called Blender Absolute Beginner. And there we go. This guy, Ryan King, he is a very popular YouTuber as far as like Blender tutorials is concerned. He breaks down the details, and as far as I think this is his day job, so he's going to be a lot better at putting together videos that are really snappy and has like really good graphics, and will keep you entertained along the way. Whereas I'm a little bit more hard-boiled about this and shoot from the hip because I got a day job. So this guy might not have a day job. I don't know, but he's really good. I like him.
Now, I know that this particular animation is 3D. I know that you also use it for your comic book. Would you be willing to pull up a page from your comic book that you've done with the help of Blender, so they can kind of show the 2D aspects that you could possibly use applications for this program?
Sure. Let's see.
And then maybe explain how you did it, a little bit. So, because 2D and 3D are two different animals. I know, I'm making you work.
I don't pay attention to any of those Blender files. Okay. I think it was the Lunar Landscape one. Now, this is comic book related, but I'm going to go into full render mode. We've got to turn off something in video editing here. One moment. Otherwise, we'll get copyright struck. And we don't want that. Like, this isn't one of the panels, but this is sort of how I do it, at least. I have no direct panels direct panels that are created entirely in Blender. 9 times out of 10 is what I will do is I'll pull up the snip tool after I've created like a basic object like this background, and what I'll do is I'll snap a screenshot and copy paste that screenshot and then slap it into Blender, or slap it into like something like from Blender to Clip Studio, and I can easily trace over the top of the background that I've created and give it a hand-painted feel. So I don't have to sit here and like waste cognitive resources on cutting and measuring and cutting and measuring and cutting and measuring for perspective constantly, which would that would take up a considerably larger amount of time. And that's what I use it for. But I'll pull up the Library of Babel, for example.
This took him a really long time to do.
Okay. So, for example, here, this is just one of the chambers for the Library of Babel. Imagine this going in infinite, like seemingly like towards the horizon in directions. There are copies of these. And I've got a scene that does have copies in it, but this one, for the sake of easing, since this scene took place just in one of these chambers, this is what I made. Now these are supposed to be. See if I can get in here. Blender, please cooperate. And I'll focus on this chair.
It's looking a little grainy, but it's probably just loading up.
Well, this is what happens when you're in full rendered view. I just copy pasted some of these books and stuff here, and they're supposed to be like books on all of these shelves here. Like each one of these like little bars is a shelf that's full of books. And I'm gonna focus on that. See, I might see what I'm possibly a fan of right there. And I created this entire room and just plunked some objects in here to give me a basic layout of what this room is supposed to look like. And it's pretty big. And you've got some like little warning lights and stuff here. And over the top of the chamber is going to be entirely glass. And this isn't the full rendered out view. This is what it looks like in full render mode. And it's going to be a little bit grainy. But see how we've got a nice glass effect there. That's pretty, I love that. Bloop.
So one of the elements would be good for using a program like this, as with comic books, is coming up with backgrounds. And being a way, if you do the 3D model, you can just, if you have like a room that you use constantly, you can come in, take a screen cap of the snippet or screenshot of the room at that angle that your art's going to be at, and then helping you to make sure that your backgrounds are consistent. Is that correct?
Yeah. And if you wanted to really get creative with it, I think I had, there we go. All right, check this thing out. I've actually created my character in 2D or in 3D here. This is just like a basic layout of what I want him to look like. If you got really creative and used these shaders just right, you could make a cell shaded character that is damn near imperceptibly different, or imperceptibly the same as it as looking like 2D artwork. That is totally achievable. It's just there's a certain degree of headache that comes with that. So as far as like character creation is concerned, and from my perspective, working with 2D for so long, it is just flat out easier for me, is easier and quicker for me to draw a character and, 3D the background than it is to sit here and manipulate the character to get them to look exactly how I want them to look in 3D. So for me, the time cost is it's not worth it for me to do that for comic books. I'm much faster just flat out drawing it. But if you were to build this character and set them up in 3D, the added benefit of this is if you ever wanted to animate your characters, holy crap, it would make it so much easier for you long term if you wanted to do it that way. So there's some cost to benefit ratios that you're going to have to personally consider here, and what your developed skill set already is, and make an assessment from there. Once you get advanced enough in a field of thought, it's not worth it. It's not really worth it past a certain point to go back and try to relearn things ground up, uh, and try to find a different workflow for working that way. It just won't be efficient for you. But that's up to you as an individual. You got to make that call.
Okay, we have another question from Gamma. It's like, I know we are talking about basics. What kind of files do we save these as? And can you just briefly talk on file management, as any new artist will likely encounter that digitally?
Okay, so file, what you're going to do is, I don't know if you guys could see these extra windows. We're going to go to, can you see that drop down tab?
We can see the drop down tab, yes.
Okay, you're just going to, like any other program, you're going to go to File and then Save As. And I don't know if you can see my Blender projects folder.
No, we cannot.
Crap. Okay. Give me 1 second. We're going to swap this to screens, and I'm going to go to screen 1. Now you should be able to see it.
Yep.
So, Blender projects, all you got to do is come down here and then name your file in this box, and then click Save As. Then after that, you can save the project normal by just going to File and Save, or your standard Control S on your keyboard. It always saves it as, like, these projects are always saved as a .blend file, but when you start getting into things like exporting and stuff like that, you can, I'm going to let you know that 3D doesn't really have a, big air quotes here, standard as far as file types are concerned when it comes to how models and stuff are saved. There's things like .fbx, .stl, Wavefront, which is .obj, and those are the most common ones, but I can compare it to .jpeg and .png and a bunch of other things, but that's like, it would be like comparing apples to oranges. Yeah, technically they're both fruit, but they're not the same thing. They're totally new types of file systems that are different. Like they have different things, they have different properties, they have different functions, that cannot be directly translated from .jpeg or .png to .fbx, for example. It just doesn't work. But like, say, if you wanted to import something in Unreal Engine, like say a model, I would probably export it as a .fbx or a .obj or something like that, because those types of programs use that same type of file. There's no universal standard, though, unfortunately. Not yet. We'll see.
Yeah. All right. Anyone else have any other questions that you'd like to ask?
Anyone?
What are some of your favorite tools to
In Blender?
use in Blender? Yeah.
favorites.
I know I ask all the hard questions.
I'm going to open up a new general file. So, and switch this back to change Blender window. Do this. One of the most common ones that I use is when I go over here to our modifiers tab and click add modifier, go to generate and click on subdivision surface. And here's what subdivision surface does. If I tab into edit mode, that means that what this object is being manipulated into to look like, this geometry, isn't real. Bigger quotes here, isn't real yet, which means it doesn't have any, it has not created vertexes. And I can change how much resolution, if you will, or how many points I want it to look like it has. And that's how you can turn a cube into a sphere. And if you want to make this geometry real, you can just go over to the little drop-down tab in the subdivision modifier and click apply. Well, it's in edit mode, so I can't apply it in edit mode. Now I click apply. And then I'll tab back into edit mode, and you can see it made all of these vertex instances real. So each one of those is a point of manipulation. So that wouldn't necessarily be my favorite, but I guess favorite in this case would be most useful. And I find that one to be one of the most useful modifier tools in the tool bag because it is used so often. And another one that's basically the same thing, if I tab into edit mode and then right click, it'll bring up another menu and it will subdivide it. But you'll notice it's subdivided a little differently than what that modifier did. But I'm not going to get into that because I'm not going to get into why it does that because that will make heads explode. It's easy to do, it's hard to explain. One of the more common ones I use when in the viewport is also, if you guys cannot see these little menus, can you see that?
Yes, we can see that menu there.
Okay. If you hit Shift A, it will bring up an all menu when it only does this when your mouse is inside the viewport window. Hit Shift A, you can go down here and pick mesh. And my cube is back.
Yay.
And then I can undo that. I can hit Shift A. I can choose something weird, like a torus.
Donut.
Rings. And or I could choose a cone. Or I can hit Shift A again and I can pick round cube. But yeah, these are just like preset objects. Like you can make any of these objects yourself. These are just like some basic preset menus. And Blender does have some add-on options where I can do things like add gears.
All right.
And I can open up this menu here, change the radius of it, change the width, the base. Woo! All sorts of stuff.
Nice. Wabbit is asking about basic texturing. I'd like a little bit of a quick rundown on that.
Okay, so texturing. Let's see. On layout here, like where your layout menus here on your top menu, this is what these presets are for, is just to tab you into a different preset Blender workspace. It always defaults on layout, but if you'll go over here to the shading tab and click on that at the top, it will give you this. And 9 times out of 10, if you have your cube selected, it will keep you in object mode, and it will give you a basic material right here, which will always start out with the principled BSDF, which is, just a basic shader or texture element. I think you were asking for textures, but specifically this is actually called shaders, but I think you meant shaders.
Shaders is fine.
Okay.
Just I'm used to the old school stuff, I guess, maybe.
Yeah, it's technically I can see how those get confused. Like Blender's categorization of things is different than what they are in compared to other software. And I was just making sure there was no confusion there. It's like, did you mean shaders? Which I think you did.
Yeah, pretty much shaders. Because I'm thinking of texture like when in the 2D aspect.
Okay.
But there's something that would give a bland cube like that a form, or kind of like the chrome sphere to the right.
Okay. So what we want to do with that is we want to, when we're in shading mode here, you're going to go down to this menu, your principled BSDF shader. Imagine these things as you don't have to be a coder to do this. You just have to know how it works. But from a coding perspective, these are basically preset little chunks of code that Blender devs have given you for easy mode, and it's to really help you as an artist. They made this for artists to be a little bit easier to manipulate, but imagine these as little preset chunks of code that you call on that already exist in the library, and you're just dumping them in there, stringing them together, and making them work. So a principled shader, that's going to be all of your basic shader information that's going to be going in here, like your color, which you can click on this field and manipulate and make it any old color you want, and it changes the color of the cube. And it's saying, hi, I am a principled shader. And this little node right here, which you can click on and manipulate and put it into surface, which it will project all of this coded information onto the surface of your material output or your object. And you can do things like change it to metallic. Now in order to make it a little bit more apparent that it's made out of metal now, you are going to have to go into rendered mode in your viewport shader and get a good angle on the light. And we can change the roughness of it. If we, pull the roughness all the way up, you can see, it scatters the light a lot more. But if we pull it all the way down, now it's super smooth and shiny and reflects the light perfectly, but metal's a little rough. So we want it kind of like this.
So the less it's more shiny, the more it's more opaque and takes away the shine or the mirror image.
Yeah, your roughness is essentially that's how bumpy the material is.
Yeah, I understand.
And it will reflect that light accordingly. And I'm going to change the sun here a little bit so I guess y'all can pay attention to that. This is going to be your light object, and I don't like the way the light is in this because it makes it really freaking hard for me to see this freaking cube. I'm going to poke the light, left click it, and then go to the little light bulb data properties here. And then I'm going to change it from a point light, which just has a this light is being emitted from this radius, like a spherical radius out from outside here, and its power is set to 1,000 watts, which is
Like the tone.
yeah, which is not that good. Now I'm going to change it to sun. So we've got a little bit more natural lighting, but that is way too freaking strong. So I'm going to bring it down to about a 4. There we go. And you can do things like change stuff in here, like your specular. These are different. These are basic, like different, like little math things that some really smart people made to refract or reflect light in very specific ways. And you can swap between those types of manipulation. Your IOR, for example, in principled BSDF, is your index of refraction. That means how much refractive quality does this object have? Now, there's not going to be a whole lot of difference here that you're going to see. But say if you want light to be refracted in a specific way, like for water, you can go online, and there are scientists that are dedicated to this that mark down the index of refraction of specific types of materials or common materials that we interact with every day. Like we know the index of refraction of light, and this little index of refraction level is based off of real world mathematics. So if you want to look up what the index of refraction of light is online, you can find the value and plug it directly into this field, and it will be accurate.
Essentially, like you're getting a difference between glass, metal, plastics.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. And each one of those has their own special index of refraction. And most materials have been documented and have a measured quantified index of refraction that you can look up online. Now your transmission, like say you could put a coat, like it's got like a coat of paint on top of it. Increase the weight of it, roughness or smoothness, and increase that coat's index of refraction as well. And you can change its tint if you want to. It's not going to make too much of a difference though. And you can change the sheen roughness, sheen weight, like the shininess quality of the object, and that sheen tint. See, look at that. We've got a base color of a greenish cube. But look, it's got a blue sheen to it. So you can make like that trippy, weird paint that changes color as you walk by it.
Yeah.
And your emission. So your emission, its strength is set to 0 right now, and its color is set to white. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change its color. I'm going to put it up in a crazy category here, or crazy color category, and I'm going to turn that thing up. Now this object is emitting light. Your object is glowing, but we don't have an atmosphere here that can really show that off. So it's just going to appear as, well, white to you. In order to fix that, if you go over to your render properties tab and you scroll down to bloom and check that box, it'll give it a little bit of a false atmosphere. which will give a better impression that it is glowing.
It's neat to do.
Pretty neat. But yep, material output, and just like our menu up here, how you can hit Shift A to add all of this stuff, you can hit Shift A down here. Hold on. Screen keys, why have you forsaken me? Where did you go? Guess it only works in layout. What the hell? Well, whatever. How dare somebody not code this and I get it for free off of GitHub and it doesn't work perfectly. But anyway, you hit Shift A and you can open up its own little shortcut menu here in the shader nodes window, and you can go to your basic shaders, and they've got a whole menu of different setups that you can use. Like, say, what if we want to make this cube look like fog or something weird like that? We're going to pick principled volume. Now we're going to take this little guy and put him over here. And I'm going to detach that string from the node. I'm going to pull the volume and put it into the material volume output. Now, the computer's having problems because this is something pretty intense to render. So it's just going to look like, a bunch of planes. But if you sit still, it finally renders it out, and you've got like a foggy cube effect. I can increase density, like its thickness of it. Can change its color. There we go. Now we've got like a poison fog or something. I can change its emission color. And if you want to be a real scientific smarty pants, you can change its black body intensity. For the nerds in the chat that know.
What's that mean, then?
It's based off of black body radiation. Black body radiation is black body radiation is something that was quantified by, I think it was Maxwell. Anyway, he basically mathematically described, it's like, oh, this is why objects glow certain colors when they're hot. So that's what you're doing by changing the black body intensity. It's applied to black body radiation. Yes, it's radiation. Exactly what Kumar said. And you can,
could you even vocally, because the people listening to the recording later won't be able to hear what she said.
Do what?
When responding to a question in the chat, could you please repeat the question or the answer in its entirety so it can be on the recording? In this case, Kamari said black body radiation is just the light emitted by objects based on their temperature.
Yes, that is black body radiation is light emitted by objects on their objects based on their temperature, which is, yep, that's nail in the head. That's exactly what it is. And you can manipulate that in Blender. Blender has a lot of real world physics things baked into here. Now, I don't understand all of them. You don't have to. You don't have to know anything about physics, really. You just have to like have an idea of where you want something to go and how you want something to look, and you can do it. And you can apply realistic physics on top of it if you so desire.
To be honest, I didn't know Blender went that in depth.
It does. Like there are some 3D programs out there, I will admit, that are a little bit better at making physics calculations. Like I think Maya is technically, but Maya is for like really, really, really realistic high-end graphics where you want to calculate every freaking raindrop that hits this metal like object or whatever, and like I'm not into that. I'm not trying to make films like that. I'm trying to make things that look, feel cool, and have they have substance over graphics. You know, I'm not into the ultra realistic stuff.
The Nintendo approach.
Yeah. I don't know what else I can cover on here if there are any other questions. Because there are a million different directions I could go. Or any other basics that anybody can think of. Anything? Anything?
Done for me.
Just wanted to say thank you for taking the time to do this tutorial. It's been really enlightening and gives a lot of context for how to get started with Blender. I'm curious if you're planning to do like follow-up lessons, because this is really interesting stuff.
Yeah, I can do follow-up. What I would probably do though is if I'm going to do follow-ups, I'd do things like I would be focusing on like these menus here, like maybe one at a time, because each one of these menus has a fractally infinite mess of rabbit holes that you can go down. There are menus on top of menus on top of menus on top of menus in here. And it's how far do you want to zoom? And yeah, I could spend probably all day on just like what I covered most of here was just layout, or like the basic layout screen. There's other things that are going to be present in the modeling screen. There are other tools that are going to bring themselves to the forefront in the sculpting screen. UV editing. We don't talk about UV editing. Texture paint. That one's one I'm a little bit weak on. I know how to do it. I just kind of stumble over myself on where to go. And that's because I have not spent enough time in texture painting. And just to show you, just to really show off what Blender's capable of here, if you want, there's a totally other menu setup that you can do. And if you go to File and New, and instead of General, we're going to select 2D animation. No, I'm not going to save this because I don't need to.
That looks pretty interesting, Padded. I pulled it up on the screen real quick. What Padded has created during our thing.
If it's making whatever. That is possibly a koosh ball. I'm not really sure.
Can you show how
All
to
right,
create fur? I know you've done that before, real quick, as a fun
Oh
thing.
yeah.
Because
I
of the
forgot.
content a lot of people like to do, might be interested in sculpting fur.
Okay, we're gonna go back to general here. Now this is a modifier. Okay. Gotta drop. Thank you so much. Later, Fox. Thank
Bye,
you.
Fox.
Okay. So we're just gonna make a fuzzy cube. Okay. We're gonna click our cube, and we're gonna go into the modifiers tab. Oh my god. I'm trying to remember which modifier it is. Not soft body, it's not particle instance. Oh. Awesome. Blender has a dedicated hair thing. So if you click the add modifiers, go to the hair drop down tab, and then go to deformation, blender hair curve, roll hair curves. We'll say blender hair curves. Oh. Nope, I goofed up. Okay, I lied. It's not modifiers. The modifiers is the wrench icon. If you go to the one just below it, it's called particles. And you'll just see a blank field with a plus or minus. Just click plus and it will add a new particle system. And then you can go from emitter to air.
Yeah, Pat had said I found fur through pressing F3 then typing fur.
That's fair. Yeah, and just to let you know, oh yeah, they've got a dynamic thing for that now. See, this is how long I've been using Blender. I've survived like 10 updates of this stuff. So I'm used to doing things a little bit differently than most people. So you can do the F3 thing and fur through curves if you wanted to. F3 is the quick menu that you can search any hotkey or function that you want to do. Just type it in, like I think they had, I don't know if they had sub. Like I can type in surface. But yeah, you can find most things in that quick start menu. The way I was doing it is the particle system. You hit plus, just go to hair. And this starts your hair off in a default state where you can set it up for custom manipulation rather than what Blender's default is for just hair. And you can do things like adjust the hair length. You can tell it to emit the hair. Right now, it's emitting them from the faces on the cube. Or I can change it to vertices. And now it's only emitting the hair off of these vertices, which there are only, since it's a cube, there are only 6 in existence. Or I can base it entirely off of its volume. So now it will make these hairs internally on the geometry as well. But I'm going to keep it on faces because that's the easiest one. If you want to increase the number of hairs, you can. But sometimes it's easier just to scroll down here to children and go from none to interpolated. So what that does is interpolation is just going to say, hey, make children or copies of these and turn the tell the hair to make more of itself and make it denser and stuff like that. And I can increase or decrease the display amount, be warned, which is what my computer's doing right now. I turned that up way too fast and it will chug. This is something that is graphically intense for it. And if you're not careful, it will make your computer explode. And I don't mean literally blow up. It'll just go no, and then Blender will crash. And you'll lose you'll lose your data. Or you'll lose a few minutes of save in that file.
What if you only want to surface, like the top surface?
Say again?
What if you want it only on the top surface?
If you only want it on the top?
Yeah, well, like the very tip top there.
Let's see.
And Gamma said, hair cube. Jim Henson would be proud.
Thank you, Kamari, for coming. We appreciate it. Have a good day.
Okay, so particle. And that's pretty advanced.
Can you just select the that particular face and apply the hair to that before you do the hair application? Would that do that particular thing?
I mean, you can, but here's where I'll show you why it's complicated. I'll show you. So I've got to go down here to our object properties. I've selected a face right here. I'm going to add vertex groups in the object data, and I'm going to name this one top face. And now that I've got it selected, I'm going to assign it that, and then I'm going to deselect, then select to make sure that that has been applied. And I'm going to go down to my particle system here. And I'm just going to call this hair. And add my hair. Set to faces. Emit from faces. Use modify. No. Render on object. Path. Hold on. None. Textures, vertex groups, hair shape. Interpolated. None. Go emitter. And where are we at? Where are we at? Where are we at? Geometry data. Velocity physics rendered as object path. Children, parting, clumping, roughness, field weight, force, settings, texture, instancing. There is a way to do it in top face, but it's complicated enough. It's going to take me a second to sort of remember how to do it because it's been a while since I've done it.
It's okay. You don't have to if you don't want to.
So I'm not going to show it here right now. Can do it. It's just I sort of forgot where it is, and this is the nightmare that is Blender. Is there's a lot of stuff, and sometimes you have to sit there and think about, like, what did I do like 3 months back a while ago, those one or two times that didn't seem important when I was doing it, but now it is. And it shows you how infrequently I've actually done that. But yeah. Anything else?
Nope, not for me.
All right. If that's the case, I'm going to drop it here so I don't get too burned out. And we should be good to go.
Awesome. Well, I'd like to thank you very much, Dark Art Studios, for giving us your knowledge. We appreciate it here. And we'll talk with you about possibly doing a Blender 102. And then we can start working through the rest of the menus, and that'll help a lot of people out how to learn it. And we do appreciate you. And there is a link in the chat for his comic book, Tales of the Gods. Please go ahead and check it out. Really good. He is the writer, artist, and everything. So give it a read.